Hi folks, my name is Chris Royce. I am making this video, short little video here for my cousin Katie. And what I wanted to do is talk to you quickly about some of the lessons that I have learned doing endurance athletics and how I apply those to everyday life. Apologies for the setting here. I'm at a hotel for one of my son's lacrosse tournaments, and wanted to get this wrapped up for her. So I know there's a PowerPoint slide with some of the points, so I'm going to walk through them quickly, and then Katie will be able to field some questions for you. First off, I've been doing endurance athletics for over 20 years now, and what I would say is endurance athletics are anything that's sort of longer than a marathon or timed events, things that are 24 hours and longer, that type of event. So I've been doing those since the late 90s, adventure races, ultra marathons, obstacle course races, things along those lines. I'm going to just jump right in. The first of these points is what I say is that it never always gets worse. And I actually heard this before. It's not, I didn't coin the phrase myself, but what that means is that things, when you're younger, you tend to think of pain on a sort of a scale that, as you're running along, something starts to ache, and in your mind, you expect that it will continue to get worse if you continue to partake in that activity. So if I'm running and my ankle hurts, the more I run, the more it's going to hurt. What you find over time is that actually doesn't hold true, and what happens is pain will typically plateau and diminish over time. The second one is if one person can do something, then any person can do it, and I really feel this is true. So everybody says, oh, how do you run 100 miles? How do you run 200 miles? I can't run a mile. I can't drive that far. That's a common comment. What this means is really when you hear that somebody has done something, what that does is it opens the door for anybody to really accomplish that. And there are things like perceived borders that people come up against that once one person passes them, you see a lot of people pass them. Easiest example of that is the 4-minute mile, which at one point was sort of thought impossible, and then as soon as somebody passed it, you see a lot of people passing, and I expect the 2-hour marathon will follow a similar path, and in years to come, it's not going to be it's going to be something that's beaten more often than not. Run your own race. So a lot of times when you're doing these races, people will influence each other. And sometimes that influence can be negative. You can be complaining in a long event, and one person's complaints can sort of permeate the other person's mind. So if somebody next to me is complaining about something, about some pain or some frustration, then I will sort of inherit that. And I really don't think that's something that you should be allowing to happen, and you should resist it as much as possible. And really, when you go to a race, you have your own race plan, you have your own goals. You should live within that plan and those goals. Plans, like Mike Tyson says, plans, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. So you will have some adversity, but stick within your own race. There are things that are outside of your control, and what that means is really in racing and in life, there are things that happen to you. Life happens to you. It's not something you do, but it is something that you have to react to. You have to live with. Like if you're going out to race, you're going to run a race, and it's a trail race, and it starts pouring rain. That will be a difficult race, but there's nothing you can do about it. So thinking about it and dwelling on it will inadvertently affect the mood of your race. So just understand that there are things that you can't control and just move on past them. If something's miserable for you, then it's miserable for everybody else. And then really outlast them. So there, this is a life lesson. This isn't really correlated directly to racing, but it comes in races a lot. So if you're doing a race and it's extremely hot, so I've done the Badwater Ultra Marathon twice. That's a 135-mile run across Death Valley over 3 mountains, 3 mountain ranges at the end of July in the summer. So temperatures 125, 130 degrees, and you're just running on asphalt that's probably 50 degrees hotter than that, and it's miserable. Well, it's miserable for everybody else too. So if you're there and it's miserable for you, the guy next to you, it's just as miserable. So all you have to do is outlast him. So if you have a harder, stronger mind than he does, you will actually outlast him, and he will end up quitting, and you, by simply not quitting, will beat him. The most important thing in a race is simply don't quit. I've done a number of races where attrition is the number one factor for who wins the race. I had a 100-mile race in the summer in Pennsylvania, actually it was, and I ended up winning overall, and that was entirely due to the weather. It was a little over 100 degrees, very humid, and I think there were probably 4 official finishers at the end of the race. It started with like 40, and I just happened to make it to number 1 simply by not quitting, and I would just watch people dropping, and I just kept shuffling along and thinking to myself, all I have to do is not quit, and I'm going to end up at a good spot. Sure enough, I won the race. There's a difference between hurt and injured. This is something I actually say to my kids too, which was said to me by a football coach in probably 7th grade who explained to me that a contusion is just a bruise and you should get back in the game, which probably isn't something I would tell my 12-year-old, but it's something that you should understand, meaning when you're doing a long endurance race, you will feel achy, things will hurt. And there's a difference between something hurting, aching, and being injured. Usually an injury comes from an acute event, falling off of something or twisting something, and you can link a pain back to some very specific event. But you will be hurting in long events, and you just have to kind of push through it. And again, back to the pain plateaus. Usually pain will go away during a race. It will come on sort of without much explanation, and it will disappear some short period later. You're your own worst enemy during a race. Don't talk yourself into quitting. This is the most common reason that people don't finish races, and I've heard it many times. I've done these death races. They're Spartan, actually peak or Spartan race death races. And they can last for days at a time. And you never go to sleep, and you're doing mentally challenging tasks. One time we crawled under barbed wire for 12 hours, 3,000 burpees, just things like that. Pulled rope for 8 hours, 10 hours straight. And what I've seen in races like that is people will start to talk themselves into something. They will, and in their minds, you can see it. They are convinced the better outcome, the best possible direction for them to take is to stop racing. And if they're hurt, like really hurt, injured, then they should. But they will convince themselves in the moment that they should quit. This is no longer fun for them. And inevitably, most of them regret it. But once you've quit, you can't unquit, and that's something that they have to then kind of live with and hold on to. So I again, don't talk yourself into it. And I've DNF'd in a race once that I can, very vividly remember, and when I did that, I talked myself into a back injury. I have a bad back, and I kind of, oh, this hurts, as time passed, I just kept repeating that to myself, and I ended up dropping out of the race. And it was in like West Virginia, and I lived in New York. I had to drive all the way back, and thought about it, and I thought to myself at the time, I'm going to remember how I feel right now, and every time I get into this situation again, I will think back to how I feel on this drive back, thinking about this and dwelling on it, and I'm just not gonna do that again. And since then, I haven't DNF'd to race since then. Did not finish. The hardest step in a race is the first step, and the easiest is the one that crosses the finish line. So what this means is there's a lot of courage to start a race that's very difficult. You have preparation. A lot of times you have to purchase gear. You have to have put in the training. You have to have come up with a plan. You have to feel good about it. There's a lot of strain and stress. But once you take that first step, they're all easier after that. There's getting going, and then it's sort of downhill from there. All you're doing is the race at that point. And once you've gotten to yourself there and you know you feel good, then it should be all downhill. Especially, I would say, in a race where when I pass the halfway mark in a race, as soon as I pass halfway, I know I'm going to finish. And it's just a matter of time after that. So that's something that I hold as soon, like every time I pass the halfway mark, when it's known, I always feel good about it. And I know at that point, and from that point forward, I typically will begin passing people because my confidence is going up as I can feel theirs diminishing. Last point of the bullets here is you can always do more than you think. People are always surprised at the performance that they've got in them, and I've seen people do amazing things, and people a lot of times are asking me, what is it that how are you able to do these things? I'm nothing special. I'm an average athlete. I've been playing sports my whole life, but it's not that I was born with some capability that other people weren't. And it's just an understanding that I can do this, I can pass this line, and once I've passed that line, I'll try to go to the next line, and then I'll go past that line. And I'm not unique in that. That's something that you can do yourself as well, and everybody can do. And you can, running is the easiest thing to do. People a lot of times ask, how do you run so far? I have a hard time going out and running. Running is simple. All you got to do is open your door and start running, and there you go. And it's not a sport that requires a tremendous amount of skill or training or anything like that. I mean, you can sharpen your skills and your form and all those things, but it's really just about putting in time and kind of pushing yourself when you want to stay at home. The other thing I want to just quickly highlight is these lessons, these sort of endurance lessons have sort of they go with me into different aspects of my life. I'm an executive, and I think about them when I'm having a difficult time at the office. I'm a parent. I think about them as I parent. I think about how do I teach my children, given the information that I've kind of gleaned through the years. Endurance athletics it tends to be a game that you get better at as you age. As you age, you tend to you have a higher pain tolerance, and you have a higher you have more perspective, so you realize how good things are and how bad they can be. And then you have patience. Long races take patience. You're not going to turn the corner after 5 minutes and hit the finish tape. It takes a while, but the rewards are bigger. And in the workplace, most acutely, there are difficult times. There are people that are pushing back on something that you want to accomplish, and you just have to meet their resistance, and you have to sort of win the battle of just waiting them out sometimes. And this is not unique to any one field or any one job or anything. That is a constant in life. Life will deal you things that are not terrific. And you just have to kind of push through them and know that on the other side it will get better. And you have to sustain. Do not give up. And that's really the core of endurance racing is if you just can wait it out and push through to the end, the rewards will be huge. So I hope you found this informative, and my cousin Katie there will be able to field any of your questions. Thank you.